So the question for assignment 1 is, what role does assessment for, as, and of play in developing a culture of learning within a classroom? So I think the first thing that you'd want to focus on specifically is understanding that how in education, learning and education itself don't stop. So whether you're in school or you're in your post-grad or you've graduated and now you're in a full-time job, the act of learning and the sense of always learning new things in education itself doesn't really end. It's a constant cycle, especially when you're a teacher. And you always want to ensure that when you're learning, like, it's to help you do better next time, or for you to go up another level either in school or possibly even in your job. So again, like, it's always pushing you to get to the next level. Like, and obviously at some point grades do come in as a factor, but I'll talk about that in a bit. So within the classroom, to foster that sense of the culture of learning within it, I think I would ensure that students understand that feedback is something that outweighs grades a little bit more. Yes, we're currently in a society and in a culture that really emphasizes grades, and that says if you don't have an A, or if you don't have an 85%, or if you don't have a 90%, getting into a university is not going to be possible for you, or you can't get into this program, which unfortunately is, for us as teachers and for students, is, I feel like, something difficult to be looking at, whereas because that's something that's made up structurally, right? It's made up to cut down on the numbers of people that get into the program. And unfortunately, that does put an extra stressor on students, and then their focus does ultimately turn to their grades. So they want to ensure and make sure that all their grades are top notch, that they can do whatever they can do to get that A+ on that assignment, so that it bumps their mark up. So when they're looking at it like that, and they're telling us that you need a 90 to get into your social sciences program, or an 80 to get into your music program, are we really looking at the education that's behind that, and what type of things the students are learning, and if they're even retaining any of that information to be getting those marks, or are they just trying to hit the nail on the head, get the mark, and get into the program or pass the class? So you always want to ensure that you're giving students feedback with a grade or an opportunity to do better. And once you start doing that, I feel like you can ensure that students are now focusing more on the feedback and how to do better. Yes, they can still be looking at their mark and say, oh, I got a 70 this time, but I know I'm capable of getting an 80 because I can see where my faults were and how I can fix my mark to make it higher next time. So instead, this way, the focus is more on the feedback that you're giving them rather than the end result or the end mark, just because they want a 90 because everyone else in the class has a 90, right? So I think that's really important. So constantly talking to your class and putting more emphasis on how feedback and assessment is a tool to help them get better, right? Feedback and assessment isn't something that's there to tell the students that you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. The reason why we're telling them where their faults are in their assignment or in their worksheet or in their project is so that they can do better, right? We're not strictly being there to be that negative voice in their head to tell them that this is wrong, you're not doing well. And I think, unfortunately, nowadays that's the mentality that students have, is that, well, they're just telling me this because I did it wrong, right? And they're kind of putting the worksheet aside and not really focusing on it anymore to fix up their mistakes. They're just moving on to the next assignment because they know how important those grades have become, right? So again, we're not really talking about that element of assessment and feedback, which is so critical. I think especially in today, when there's so much mental health talk going on, that I feel like if we focused more on feedback and assessment, students could really focus on their strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully help their mental health and anxiety, versus strictly getting angry at that 78% instead of getting an 80%, like, because again, they're focusing too much on the grades. So yeah, I think maybe setting the tone at the beginning of the year and telling students that, you know, I'll give you feedback and assessment as you go. Make sure that your feedback and your assessment is also very clear when you're writing it. And I feel like even through assignments, maybe do some assignments where you don't write their top mark, their mark for the assignment at the top of it. Just write strictly the feedback. Talk to the students and see if they can do some more self-assessment about where they think this assignment sort of falls, what they can do, and how they can use your feedback, their own self-assessment, to see if they can possibly rework the assignment or redo the assignment, and see if they can do even better. Therefore, they're focusing on the things that they didn't do too well on, whether it be grammar in a writing assignment or notes while playing like a music exam. They can see now exactly what it was that they were doing wrong, or things that need work. Specifically work on those, regain some skills in that area, strengthen parts that weren't too strong, and then ultimately at the end get a better mark, and you know that they've learned what it is that they've needed to learn for that next part of the assessment to see if they can get that higher mark. But along that process, you're kind of tricking them into learning what they kind of missed there, right? So I think if we can set that type of a tone at the beginning of the year and telling students that your feedback is more important, I'll give you more chances on your assignment, I'll give you more chances on your playing test, because I want you to do better, right? I want you to be able to learn and understand what your next steps in learning are so we can see how far we can go, and make sure that your class isn't strictly built on marks. That again, that you're doing that feedback, doing peer feedback, peer assessment, more self-assessment. The more that they become I guess more critical in the way that they're writing things or doing something, or even looking at a math sheet and saying, okay, I understand division, but I don't really understand factors. Then they can say, okay, I've got division set and put aside, and you know that they're doing really well on that. But with my factors, I know that that's something I need to work on, so they can work on it so that both division and factors are now at the same level of their understanding. So I think assessment as for and of learning are really critical in that, and it's really crucial to emphasize that feedback is more important than grades in your classroom.